My fiancée demanded I gift her parents a share of my business before our wedding. When I refused, she threatened to leave me. So I did this, and now she is begging. I'm 33 male, and honestly, I'm proud of what I've accomplished. My tech consulting firm isn't Google or Amazon, but it's mine. I started it with no outside help, no rich relatives, no magical investments. Just me, my laptop, and way too many sleepless nights. I sacrificed a lot to make it work. Skipped vacations, ate ramen for dinner when I couldn't afford takeout, and kissed any kind of work-life balance goodbye. So yeah, I'm pretty attached to what I've built. About a year ago, I met Jenna, 29 female. At first, she seemed like the perfect match. She was ambitious, confident, and had this magnetic energy that drew people in. She knew how to dress, talk, and charm a room in ways that I'll admit I could never pull off. We started dating, and things were great for a while. I thought I'd finally found someone who understood my hustle. Fast forward a year, and we were engaged. The proposal was nothing flashy, just us, a nice dinner, and a quiet moment where I asked her to marry me. She said yes. And for a while I thought I was on cloud nine. Planning the wedding wasn't exactly my thing, but Jenna took the reins like a pro. Venues, dresses, catering, she had it all under control, and I was just happy to go along with it. Or at least I thought I was. One night, about 3 months before the big day, we were sitting at the kitchen table. Jenna had her laptop open, scrolling through Pinterest boards of flower arrangements or something. I was half paying attention, sipping my coffee and pretending to care about the difference between peonies and roses. Then, out of nowhere, she hit me with it. Babe, she said in that tone that meant she wanted something. We need to talk about my parents. I raised an eyebrow. Okay, what about them? She smiled, all sweet and casual. Don't you think we should do something special to thank them for everything they've done for us? I blinked. Didn't we just take them on that weekend trip to Napa? And I bought your dad that expensive watch he wanted. What else are you thinking? She set her laptop down and leaned across the table like she was about to share a brilliant idea. I was thinking maybe you could give them a stake in your business. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Wait, what? A small stake, she clarified, as if that made it any better. Just as a gesture of gratitude. They've always wanted to be part of something successful, and this would mean so much to them. I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of what she just said. You want me to give your parents a share of my company as a gift? Yes, she said, smiling like this was a totally normal thing to ask. It's a sign of trust and respect. They've done so much for me. This would show that you appreciate them too. I couldn't believe it. I actually laughed, thinking she had to be joking. Jenna, I built this company from nothing. Your parents had no part in it. Why would I give them a share? Her smile faltered, and she gave me this look like I was being unreasonable. Because they're family. My family is going to be your family soon. This isn't just about business. It's about building connections and showing that you value them. I put down my coffee, suddenly wide awake. Jenna, I don't think you understand how businesses work. Giving someone a stake in my company isn't a casual thing. It's not like handing out party favors. This is my livelihood. She sighed like I was the one being difficult. You're overthinking it. It's just a symbolic gesture. They're not going to take over or anything. I rubbed my temples trying to stay calm. Jenna, this isn't symbolic. It's legal. Your parents didn't help me build this company, and they didn't invest in it. Why would I hand them part of it? Her tone shifted then, becoming sharper. Because they're my parents, Aaron. Without them, I wouldn't even be here. Don't you think they deserve something in return? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They deserve respect, sure. But respect doesn't mean giving away something I've worked my ass off for. The conversation ended there for the night, at least. But as I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something bigger. Jenna's request wasn't just weird, it was entitled. And the fact that she thought it was reasonable? That was a massive red flag. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. Jenna had always been a little extravagant. She grew up in a family where money wasn't exactly tight, and she had this habit of expecting the best without questioning where it came from. I'd always thought it was harmless, but now it felt like she was treating my business, my life's work, as some kind of bargaining chip. The day after Jenna's little suggestion, I woke up hoping she'd slept it off. Maybe she'd had a momentary lapse in judgment. People say dumb things when they're caught up in emotions, right? I figured she'd realize how absurd the idea was, and we'd move on. I couldn't have been more wrong. That morning, I made us coffee like usual, and for a minute, everything felt normal. She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for the coffee, and started scrolling on her phone while I read emails on my laptop. I actually thought, maybe I overreacted. Maybe she'll let it go. But then like clockwork, she brought it up again. Babe, she said, putting down her phone, I was thinking more about what we talked about last night. My stomach dropped. What we talked about last night could only mean one thing. Jenna, I started already exhausted. We don't need to rehash this. I thought we were done with that conversation. She gave me this practice smile, the kind she usually saved for convincing me to go to overpriced brunch spots. I just think you're not seeing the bigger picture here, she said. This isn't about the money or control. It's about showing my parents that you value them as much as I do. I closed my laptop, realizing I wasn't getting out of this conversation. Jenna, I respect your parents. I really do. But giving them a stake in my company isn't the bigger picture. It's a legal and financial nightmare. I leaned back in my chair, trying to stay calm. Once someone owns a stake in a business, it's theirs. It doesn't matter if they're involved or not. And no offense, but your parents don't know the first thing about running a tech company. She waved her hand dismissively. They don't need to know. It's not about running anything. It's about them feeling appreciated. I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious. She was dead serious. The rest of the day, the conversation replayed in my head. I couldn't focus on work because I kept thinking, is this what the rest of my life is going to be like? Constant guilt trips over unreasonable demands? That night, it got worse. We were sitting on the couch watching TV when, suddenly, she turned to me and said, you know, if my parents had a stake in the company, it could really benefit you too. I hit pause on the show. What are you talking about now? They're really well connected, she said, flipping her hair like she was pitching me a business deal. My dad knows tons of people in real estate, and my mom's in a few women's entrepreneur groups. They could help bring in more clients. I rubbed my temples. Jenna, my business doesn't need your parents' help. I've been growing it just fine without them. But think about the potential, she said, her voice getting more excited. With their connections, you could scale faster. This isn't just for them, it's for us. For our future. And there it was. She'd shifted tactics. The demand wasn't just about pleasing her parents anymore. Now it was about our future. Jenna, I said slowly, if this is about our future, then you should be supporting the business I've already built, not trying to hand pieces of it to your parents. She frowned, clearly not liking where this was going. I am supporting you. I just think you're being short-sighted. My parents are excited about us getting married, and this would make them feel like they're part of something meaningful. It wasn't excitement. It was entitlement. Plain and simple. But I didn't want to blow up at her. Not yet. Anyway, look, I said, I respect that your parents are important to you, but that's crossing a line. Her frown deepened, and for the first time, I saw something in her expression that made me uneasy. She wasn't just upset. She was calculating. The next day, things took a turn I didn't see coming. Jenna had apparently decided to recruit backup. Her mom called me while I was at work. Hi, Aaron. Her mom said in this overly cheerful voice that immediately put me on edge. I just wanted to thank you for being so thoughtful about including us in the business. Jenna mentioned your idea, and we're so touched. I nearly dropped my phone. Excuse me? Don't be modest, she said with a laugh. Jenna told us you're thinking about giving us a stake in your company as a wedding gift. It's such a generous gesture. You're truly part of the family already. I was so stunned, I couldn't even speak for a second. Then I managed to stammer. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I never agreed to anything like that. Her tone shifted instantly. Oh well, that's not what Jenna said. Yeah, well, Jenna and I haven't exactly come to an agreement on this, I said firmly. And frankly, I'm not comfortable with the idea. Her mom went silent for a moment, then said, I see. Well, I hope you'll reconsider. This would mean a lot to us. I ended the call, my blood boiling. Jenna had gone behind my back and sold her parents on an idea I'd flat out refused. When I got home that night, I confronted her. Why did your mom call me about the business? Jenna didn't even look guilty. I thought it would help if you understood how much this could mean to them. Sometimes people need a little encouragement. A little encouragement? I snapped. You made it sound like I'd already agreed to this. She crossed her arms, her tone turning defensive. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I was just trying to get everyone on the same page. The same page? I said, my voice rising. Jenna, this isn't some group project. This is my business, my work. And you have no right to promise anything about it to anyone, especially not your parents. For the first time, I saw a flash of anger in her eyes. If you can't do this one thing for me and my family, maybe you don't really care about us as much as you say you do. I stared at her, stunned. Was she seriously guilt-tripping me over this? You know what, Jenna? I said finally, if this is how you're going to act, maybe we need to rethink a few things. I walked out of the room before she could respond, my mind racing. I didn't know where this was going, but one thing was clear. Jenna wasn't backing down, and neither was I. I thought Jenna's antics had reached their peak already, but I was wrong. That was just the warm-up act. What came next turned this whole situation from annoying to straight-up toxic. The next morning, I called my best friend Dave. If anyone could give me an honest take, it was him. When I explained the situation, he let out a long whistle. Dude, this is bad. Like run for the hills bad. Yeah, no kidding, I muttered. Let me get this straight, he said. She's basically threatening to end things unless you hand over part of your business to her parents? Pretty much, I said. And she doesn't see why that's insane? No. Dave let out a laugh, the kind that's more disbelief than humor. Man, I don't know what to tell you. This isn't normal like at all. If she's this entitled now, imagine what she'll be like when you're married. You sure you want to go through with this? That was the question, wasn't it? For the first time, I wasn't sure the answer. That evening, Jenna hit me with the ultimatum. We were sitting in the living room, barely speaking, when she suddenly said, So, have you made your decision? Decision about what? I asked, even though I already knew. The shares, she said bluntly. Are you going to do it or not? I looked her dead in the eye. No, Jenna, I'm not. She leaned back, crossing her arms. Then maybe this relationship isn't going to work. For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to figure out if she was bluffing, but her expression told me she wasn't. Maybe it's not, I said finally. Her eyes widened, like she hadn't expected me to call her out. You're seriously willing to throw everything away over this? I could ask you the same thing, I said. You're the one making unreasonable demands and threatening to walk away when you don't get your way. What kind of foundation is that for a marriage? She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up and walked out of the room. As I sat there in the silence, I realized something This wasn't just a fight. This was a turning point, and no matter how it ended, things were never going to be the same. After Jenna's ultimatum, I spent the next day walking around in a fog. My mind was spinning. I couldn't concentrate on work, and I kept replaying our argument over and over again. I knew something had to change, but I wasn't sure what. Should I fight harder to make her understand, try to compromise somehow, or was this whole relationship doomed? Then I remembered my lawyer, Olivia. She wasn't just a legal expert. She was a friend who had been through some messy situations herself. If anyone could give me solid advice, it was her. I called Olivia and told her I needed to talk. She didn't even hesitate. "Come by my office this afternoon," she said. "We'll figure it out." When I walked in her office, Olivia greeted me with a grin and a coffee. "All right, Aaron, what's got you so rattled?" I sighed and sat down, spilling the whole story. I told her about Jenna's request, the guilt trips, the call from her mom, and finally the ultimatum. Olivia's grin faded as I spoke, replaced by a look of pure disbelief. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Wow, that's a lot. Tell me about it," I muttered. "Let me get this straight," she said. "Your fiancée is demanding you give her parents a stake in your company as a wedding gift?" "Yep, and she threatened to end the engagement if you don't." I nodded. Olivia let out a low whistle. "Aaron, this is a massive red flag, like waving and run the other way red flag." "I know," I said. "But what am I supposed to do? I love her, but this feels like a line I can't cross." "You're absolutely right," Olivia said firmly. "You can't cross this line, not just for your sake, but for the future of your business. If you give away shares now, you're opening yourself up to a world of legal and financial complications." "Like what?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "For starters, if you transfer shares to her parents, those shares legally belong to them. If anything goes wrong, say they decide they want more involvement, or they sell their stake to someone else, you lose control of that portion of your business. And if you and Jenna get married, it gets even messier. Those shares could be considered marital property, which means they'd be up for grabs in a divorce." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. "So you're saying this could screw me over in more ways than one?" "Exactly," Olivia said. "And let's be real here. If Jenna is making these kinds of demands now, what's to stop her from making even bigger ones down the road?" I sat there, staring at my coffee. Olivia was right. This wasn't just a one-time issue. It was a glimpse into a future I didn't want any part of. "What do I do?" I asked finally. Olivia leaned forward, her expression serious. "You need to protect yourself first. Make sure your business is legally untouchable. Update your operating agreement to specify that no shares can be transferred without your explicit consent. And if you haven't already, separate your personal finances from your business accounts. Keep everything clean and untangled." "Done," I said. "I've always kept my business finances separate." "Good," Olivia said. "Now about Jenna, you need to be crystal clear with her. No more maybe, or we'll see. Tell her flat out that this isn't happening and that it's not up for discussion. If she can't accept that, well," she trailed off, but I knew what she was implying. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I might have to end it." Olivia nodded, her expression sympathetic. "I know it's not easy, Aaron, but you need to think about what's best for you in the long run. A healthy relationship doesn't involve ultimatums and manipulation." That night, I went home feeling more resolved than I had in days. Olivia's words echoed in my head. A healthy relationship doesn't involve ultimatums. Jenna was sitting on the couch when I walked in, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I set my bag down and stood in front of her. "We need to talk," I said. She looked up, her expression guarded. "About what?" "About the business. About your parents. About this whole situation." Jenna sighed dramatically, like she was already tired of the conversation. "Aaron, we've been over this. I don't know why you're making such a scene out of it." "Because it is a big deal," I said. "And I need you to understand that this isn't going to happen. I'm not giving your parents a stake in my company, and that's final." Her eyes narrowed. "So that's it? You've made up your mind, and I just have to accept it?" "Yes," I said firmly. "You do. Because this isn't about love, or family, or respect. This is about you and your parents trying to take something that doesn't belong to you." Jenna stood up, her face flushing with anger. "How dare you? My parents have done nothing but support us, and this is how you repay them? By being selfish and greedy." "Selfish and greedy?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Jenna, I've gone out of my way to make your parents feel included. But giving them a piece of my business? That's not inclusion, it's entitlement," I said. She crossed her arms, glaring at me. "Fine. If you're so determined to be selfish, maybe we shouldn't be getting married." The words hung in the air like a challenge, but I didn't take the bait. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said, "That's what I've already decided." For a moment, Jenna just stared at me, stunned. She clearly hadn't expected me to stand my ground. The next morning, I called Olivia again and updated her on what had happened. "You did the right thing," she said. "But be prepared for more fallout. If Jenna's this entitled now, she's not going to back down without a fight." Olivia wasn't wrong. Over the next few days, Jenna made it her mission to convince me I was the bad guy. She accused me of being cold, unloving, and ungrateful. She even tried to get some of our mutual friends on her side, but thankfully most of them saw through her nonsense. By the end of the week, I knew one thing for sure. This relationship wasn't salvageable. Jenna had shown me who she really was, and I couldn't unsee it. By the time Jenna and I sat down to talk again, I was done playing nice. I'd gone through every emotion, confusion, frustration, disappointment, and I'd finally hit my breaking point. She thought I'd cave. She thought her guilt trips, manipulation, and threats would wear me down. But she underestimated one thing. I'm not the kind of guy who gives in to ultimatums. The evening started calmly enough. Jenna had been unusually quiet all day, which honestly made me suspicious. Normally, she'd be texting me nonstop, sending me links to overpriced wedding decor, or ranting about some minor inconvenience. But that day, radio silence. I figured she was gearing up for round 2 of Let's Make Aaron Give Up His Company. Sure enough, as soon as we finished dinner, she turned to me and said, "So, have you thought any more about what we talked about?" I put my fork down and looked her straight in the eye. "Jenna, I don't need to think about it anymore. I've made my decision. The answer is no. It's not happening." Jenna crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You're acting like I asked for the entire company. It's just a small stake, a token of appreciation. You're making it into this huge, dramatic thing." "Because it is a huge, dramatic thing," I shot back. "Once I give up shares, I lose control over that part of my business. Your parents could sell their stake, meddle in decisions, or worse. And if we get married, those shares could end up tangled in a divorce settlement. This isn't just about appreciation. It's about protecting what I've worked my ass off to build." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "If you're so worried about protecting your precious business, maybe you shouldn't be getting married at all." The room went silent. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. "You know what, Jenna?" I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I shouldn't be getting married to you." She glared at me, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to find something to say. Finally, she hissed, "You'll regret this. My parents will think you're a greedy, ungrateful asshole, and so will everyone else." I laughed bitterly. "Go ahead and tell them. Hell, tell the whole world. I've got nothing to hide. But don't forget, I've got the receipts. Every text, every conversation, every little attempt to guilt trip me into this. You really want to play that game?" Her face went pale, and for the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. "You recorded me?" "I didn't plan to," I said. "But after that stunt with your mom calling me, I figured I needed to protect myself. So yeah, I've got evidence. And if you try to spin this story, I won't hesitate to set the record straight." She opened her mouth to argue, but closed it again, clearly realizing she was backed into a corner. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the house. The next few days were chaotic. Jenna called me multiple times, alternating between angry rants and tearful pleas. At first, I ignored her, but eventually, I picked up one of her calls, figuring I might as well hear her out. "Aaron," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry. I was under a lot of pressure from my parents. They've been pushing me to make sure our marriage is secure, and I guess I let that get to me." "That's not an excuse, Jenna," I said bluntly. "You didn't just let your parents pressure you. You tried to pressure me. You didn't care how it made me feel, and you didn't stop to think about the consequences." "I know," she said, sniffling, "but I didn't mean to hurt you. I love you. I just wanted to make my family happy." "If you loved me," I said, my voice steady, "you wouldn't have tried to manipulate me into doing something that goes against everything I've worked for. Love isn't about making someone sacrifice their dreams to appease your parents." She started crying again, but I didn't stick around to listen. I hung up and blocked her number. In the days that followed, Jenna tried every tactic she could think of. She called my parents, my friends, even a few of my business contacts, trying to paint me as the villain. The first wave of fallout came from Jenna's parents. Unsurprisingly, they weren't happy. I'd blocked Jenna on my phone, but her parents managed to get through. The first call came from her mom, who, I swear, should have been a politician with the way she could spin things. "Hi, Aaron," she started in this overly sweet tone. "I just wanted to touch base and clear up any misunderstandings. I'm sure Jenna didn't mean to upset you. I didn't even try to play along. There's no misunderstanding, Mrs. Carter. Jenna tried to pressure me into giving you and your husband a stake in my business. And when I said no, she threatened to end the engagement. That's pretty clear." There was a pause, and then she said, "Well, maybe she just didn't explain it properly. You know how passionate she can get. She only wanted to include us because we care so much about her future. And yours." I almost laughed. "Mrs. Carter, with all due respect, this isn't about passion or care. I'm not giving away something I built from the ground up, and I'm not going to let anyone bully me into it." Her tone shifted, becoming colder. "Aaron, I think you're being very short-sighted. Family is about compromise. If you can't understand that, maybe Jenna was right to reconsider this relationship." "Maybe she was," I said, my voice steady. "Goodbye, Mrs. Carter." I hung up before she could respond and immediately blocked her number 2. The second wave came from mutual friends. Jenna wasted no time spinning her version of events to anyone who would listen. According to her, I was a control freak who didn't value family and refused to share the success I supposedly owed to others. It didn't take long for some of those friends to start reaching out to me, wanting to know my side of the story. One friend, Emily, texted me, "Hey Aaron, I heard some things from Jenna, and I just want to understand what's going on. Did you really call off the engagement because she wanted to involve her parents in your business?" I sighed and decided to nip this in the bud. I texted back, "Emily, here's the short version. Jenna demanded I give her parents a stake in my company as a wedding gift. When I refused, she threatened to end the engagement. I wasn't about to be manipulated like that, so I walked away. I have proof if you want to see it." To her credit, Emily replied quickly. Wow, that's not the version I heard. Thanks for explaining. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. That was the pattern with most people. They'd reach out after hearing Jenna's twisted narrative, but once I share my side, and sometimes a screenshot or two, they realized the truth. A few people stayed neutral, which was fine with me, but most were supportive. And Jenna? She was losing allies fast. The third wave was Jenna herself. After her attempts to rally support fell flat, she shifted tactics. Suddenly, I was getting emails and voicemails full of apologies and sob stories. Aaron, I'm so sorry, one voicemail began, her voice trembling like she was on the verge of tears. I let my parents get into my head, and I pushed you too far. Please, can we just talk? I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I deleted the voicemail without replying. Love? Was that what she called trying to manipulate me into giving away a piece of my company? If this was love, I wanted no part of it. Another email came a few days later, this one more desperate. Aaron, please. I made a mistake. I was under so much pressure, and I wasn't thinking straight. Can we work this out? I miss you. It was tempting to respond just to tell her how ridiculous she sounded, but I didn't. I knew engaging with her would only give her more fuel. Instead, I forwarded the emails to Olivia, my lawyer, and asked if I needed to take any further action. Olivia assured me that as long as Jenna wasn't harassing me or trying to interfere with my business, I was fine to ignore her. By the end of the first week, things started to quiet down. The calls and messages stopped, and I didn't hear from Jenna or her parents again. I thought maybe I'd finally turned a corner, until one of my employees brought something to my attention. Hey, Aaron, she said, pulling me aside after a team meeting. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a post about you on Facebook. It's from someone named Jenna Carter. She's saying some pretty harsh stuff. My stomach sank. What kind of stuff? She hesitated. She's calling you controlling and greedy, and she's saying you abandoned her right before the wedding because you didn't want to share your success with her family. I took a deep breath and nodded. Thanks for letting me know. I'll take care of it. When I looked up the post later, it was exactly what I expected. Jenna had written a long, dramatic rant about how I'd betrayed her and refused to compromise for the sake of our relationship. The comments were a mixed bag. Some people sympathized with her, while others questioned her version of events. I didn't respond to the post directly, but I made sure to save screenshots. Then I called Olivia again. This is exactly why I told you to document everything, she said. If she tries to escalate this further, we'll be ready. Thankfully, it didn't come to that. The post eventually fizzled out, and most people seemed to move on. Jenna, however, wasn't so lucky. Her attempts to smear me only made her look petty, and it wasn't long before the truth caught up to her. Mutual friends who had initially taken her side started reaching out to apologize, saying they'd heard the full story and couldn't believe how far she'd gone. Looking back, I realized I dodged a massive bullet. I stood my ground, protected what I'd built, and walked away with my dignity intact. And Jenna? Well, I'm sure she's still out there somewhere, trying to spin her sob story to anyone who will listen. But that's not my problem anymore. As far as I'm concerned, I made the right choice. My business is mine, my boundaries are intact, and my future is looking a hell of a lot brighter without her in it.